Welcome back to On the Hunt at foxnews.com live. I'm Jonathan Hunt. Law enforcement agencies are increasingly using social media to better serve the public. Erik Syverson, who is an internet law attorney, joins us now from our LA bureau. Good morning to you out there, Erik.
Good morning, Jonathan. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Thanks for being here. Now tell me, how exactly are law enforcement agencies using social media these days?
Well, it's very interesting. Law enforcement agencies are using social media in a variety of manners. The most obvious way that law enforcement is using social media is to track and apprehend criminals who have committed violent crime or pin down suspects. Another way, and perhaps the most useful way that law enforcement can use social media, is to get out a message to the public. So in times of natural disasters, for instance, law enforcement can use social media to alert the public to potential dangers or places where they may seek relief. Also, law enforcement can use social media to get out a message in times of protest. We've seen this throughout the Middle East, where law enforcement, in fact, closes down social media, or in the UK with the recent austerity protests, the UK officials are able to use the social media to work with the public and update them on where to stay away from, or also apprehend participants in such protests. So it's really quite exciting. It brings up a lot of issues, both as an aid to help the public, but particularly in America, where we have things like the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment, it also brings up issues that may cause the public concern.
Yeah, talk about the civil liberty issues a little bit here. If the law enforcement are using social media to track criminals, to, if you like, spy on people's movements and behaviors, there's a legal can of worms there, is there not?
Oh, you've hit it on the head, Jonathan. There certainly is, and I don't think the courts really understand how to deal with it yet. It comes down to this. The Fourth Amendment says essentially that law enforcement needs to go get a warrant from a judicial officer if you have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So that standard opens up a whole host of issues with regard to social media. The reasons for that are numerous. Okay, so on a Facebook profile page, you have different privacy settings. You can have a public feed or a private feed. Now, if your Facebook page is a public feed, I don't think there's much argument. You're putting it out there for anyone in the public on the internet to access, hundreds of millions of people. If it's a private feed, that brings up a different issue. How large is your social network? What if you have 500 friends on Facebook? Is that private enough? Do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy? You're communicating with potentially 500 people. Does law enforcement have to then go get a warrant to monitor your page? These are issues right now being decided on a case-by-case basis.
Scott, let me bring Scott Blakeman into the conversation here, Erik, for a moment. How concerned are you about the privacy issues here with law enforcement agencies around the world becoming involved in social media?
Well, it's an important issue, not just with social media, just our information is just out there. And I think what should be applied is the standard we have now, that if you do suspect somebody, you need to get a warrant. And getting into, public walls of Facebook, I can understand that. But once you get into messages and private chats, it really does raise a lot of red flags. So I think we need to apply the same standards that we do now to this new age of social media.
Yeah, Erik, you mentioned the recent riots in Britain, and there was a suggestion, which I believe the British government may have backed off a little bit on now, but a suggestion that they were going to work with BlackBerry, the BlackBerry makers RIM, Research in Motion, to actually access the accounts, the instant messaging accounts of people that they just believed, not actually knew, but believed may have been inciting some of that violence. Surely that is quite simply illegal, at least in this country.
Well, in America, I think so, but what we're seeing in other countries, especially in the Middle East, where protests, where social networks are simply shut down in the wake of protests. So other countries have, law enforcement has a lot more latitude in how they want to manipulate social network data and access that data. Here in America, as I referred, we have issues like the First Amendment, so simply shutting down a social network would raise First Amendment issues. And then you have the Fourth Amendment, the search and seizure law. So Other countries are going much further. I mean, we see this in, you know, Syria, Egypt, Iran, accessing of this data.
Do you see some case coming up in the future, and that this is going to end up as a Supreme Court case that will ultimately decide how far law enforcement agencies will go, or will it be decided at a lower court level, Erik?
Oh, I believe absolutely. I mean, we're simply not there yet, but I believe over the next 10 to 20 years, you will see Supreme Court cases. You will definitely see cases wind their way to the Supreme Court on this issue. I don't think we're that far from that at this point, where you'll see a Supreme Court case with regard to law enforcement accessing of a Facebook page, for example, or a Twitter feed. That will happen very shortly, I believe.
All right, Erik Syverson, Internet law attorney, joining us from LA today. Thank you very much, Erik.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.